All right, so again, thanks for joining today's session on K2 using and managing the contract lifecycle. My name is Michelle Salazar, and I'm a technical specialist here at K2. And today we're going to focus a little bit again on managing that lifecycle for contracts using K2. Now, in today's session, just a quick agenda. We'll do a brief introduction to K2. We'll then dig a little bit deeper into defining what a contract lifecycle actually consists of and really what role K2 can play in that lifecycle. We'll then walk through a demonstration of using K2 in that lifecycle process. And finally, we'll wrap up and do a little Q&A. If you have any questions, again, type those in that questions panel. All right, so as a real brief introduction to K2, for those of you that may not be familiar with K2, K2 is essentially a platform for delivering process-based business applications. We provide some nice visual design tools for rapid solution composition, whether that's building a form or even creating the process, and then down to even having visibility into that process and those forms and that data. We've been around since about 2000 and are headquartered in Redmond, Washington, and have offices worldwide, really supporting more than 2,500 customers in over 40 countries. So, Microsoft application as well as other existing applications. So to get started, I really like to start with just highlighting a quick quote from one of our customers because it specifically touches today's topic on contract management. Sanofi is a global healthcare leader that discovers, develops, and distributes therapeutic solutions focused on patients' needs. So they're really part of that healthcare environment. Now, Sanofi Group in Poland has to date implemented more than 100 workflow solutions across all areas of their business. Those range from credit card expenditures to what we're focusing on today, their new contracts workflow process. Now, their new process enabled the Sanofi Group to standardize and manage approximately 50 new contracts at a time. So imagine your work environment and managing contracts, what that really entails. There's quite a lot involved in that. And with K2 as their platform, they're really able to manage quite a few of them at one time. Now, each of those contracts obviously have very different approval stages, but there is some structure to those. And really for those contracts that are considered to be non-standard, obviously compliance comes into play. So the K2 platform is able to really provide a stringent and auditable, which is an important term when we come to contracts, authorization framework so that compliance is still met. So again, being able to build those workflows on that contract management framework or solution and build those quickly and still have that compliance and authorization in place. And as I mentioned, they have over 100 workflows and ranging from credit card expenditures, travel expenses, and of course contract approvals, which really says that anything that you do that involves a process is what really the K2 platform supports, whether that be that expense claim or these complex contract life cycle. That's something that K2 can really play into. So really our goal at K2 is to provide that software to make your applications or make your people more efficient. So let's talk a little about what is that platform, and we'll dive a little bit deeper into that as we get into the discussion as it relates to contract management. But essentially, we provide you visual tools for faster delivery of solutions. So you want to be able to build these solutions quickly and get them out to market. Integration tools. So typically, most organizations, I'm sure yourself as well, has existing applications that are already in place. And K2 is not meant to go and change that application, but essentially be that bridge between your applications so that you can integrate with those tools and solutions and access your business data directly and automate that system interaction. You also have an enterprise class application service, so it acts as that process platform for your organization. Again, being able to span line of business systems, people, and departments as well. And then, of course, notwithstanding the reporting, so being able to visualize and have full visibility into any process that you're creating. And again, today we're going to talk about contract management. So really, what is contract management? So if we think about it as efficiently managing contract creation, execution, and analysis of contracts. So let's talk about what goes into that, in a little bit more detail into that. Negotiating terms. Obviously, when you create a contract, you have terms and conditions that need to be created. and those get negotiated by different parties, and those different parties each might go back and forth on determining what are the correct terms and conditions for the appropriate set of types of contracts. Compliance, as we saw with Sanofi, compliance is a major issue and a major thing they needed to focus on. So being able to ensure that compliance is being met throughout that process, whether you're looking at standardized contracts or even non-standardized contracts. Documenting changes. So as this contract life cycle goes through, there are obviously different changes that are occurring. Being able to capture everything that's occurring for those changes, whether one person touches that contract and touches the terms, you want to have access and visibility to that. When did they make that change? Who gets the next approval for that change? Should it be routed dynamically based on the type of change that was made? And then, of course, again, the approval of changes. Those approvals can be different users depending on different types or topics of those contracts. And so really what that comes along to is, again, that contract life cycle. All of these pieces come into play when we're building that contract. So if we think about it as different steps in that process, if you will, the first thing we want to do is facilitate the online collaboration. So instead of passing or sending emails back and forth with attachments to it, or putting a piece of paper on somebody's desk for them to highlight or redline different elements, we want to facilitate more of an online collaboration. So again, being able to capture that full visibility. We want to be able to automate that approval workflow. So again, depending on who needs to make the changes. And maybe you have the ability to even dynamically add a new contract approver depending on that type of contract. Trigger renewals and expirations. So as a contract comes into play, maybe it should be reviewed again in another 3 months or even a year. So again, being able to set dates and deadlines on an automated process that allows you to trigger those renewals and expirations. So we need to review this process. Let's kick off a renewal process or a sub-process that allows us to evaluate that, whatever timeline we need to set for that. Role-based security. So it's not always going to the same person every time. This might be involved in a legal role or somebody that just looks at the terms and conditions. So again, being able to route it to those different users based on the type of security relative for those specific stages of that process. Audit control. For every step in our process that we're going through, the online collaboration, the triggering of renewals, everything is being captured by K2 in this process. And as we capture that information, we want to be able to see what's going on. So we want to be able to have a dashboard that shows us the number of contracts, maybe any trending that's occurring, new contracts that are coming in, how many are getting declined. Do we have any bottlenecks in our processes? And then, of course, the visibility throughout. So for every stage of that contract life cycle, we want to be able to visualize and see the reporting for those steps. So again, and that can occur starting at the beginning, going through the end, and then go through reiterations of that as well. So it's never just a start and end type of process. There's a lot of things going on in between that we want to be able to manage. So some areas where we can see contract management, obviously in operations, sales and marketing might have some contract renewals, quote to cash, purchasing, finance, so an HR policy management. So again, lots of areas where you can apply the same type of criteria about managing the process, facilitating online collaboration, security, compliance, etc. So let's kind of take a step back now. And what if you could have that system to support contract management, standardize the contract creation, and even the maintenance of those processes? Again, all withstanding the visibility throughout. And again, we think about creating the process, but again, sometimes we forget about the maintenance of that. So being able to do those renewals and triggering those timelines or those deadlines where we need to take another look at that step in that process. And this is really where K2 comes into play. It's really about being able to build that robust contract management solution without writing any code. And so what K2 can bring to the table is really the access to your existing system. So if you have already contract terms or conditions that need to be pulled into those contracts, K2 can integrate with those systems to bring that into the process and even the forms, which we'll see today. And being able to reuse that data. So once you create that connection, you have visibility through that and can use that throughout the process. And really these are what we call the 4 pillars of a K2 business application. So we can kind of talk about each one individually real quickly. The first thing is you have declarative forms. So with a browser-based design experience that K2 provides, you're able to assemble forms without having to write code and being able to use those in a reusable fashion. And again, throughout today's demonstration, we'll go ahead and show you some of that reusability and some of the forms that were created using K2 forms. The next piece is the workflow. So being able to build declarative workflows, graphical design experiences, so we don't have to write any code when we're building these workflows. These workflows can be built with users from varying skill sets, from developers to business analysts, and also being able to integrate with your existing system. So we want to retrieve information and update information from our existing system inside of our workflow as well. You also have the ability to integrate, again, with that existing data. So you can integrate whether it's on-premise or in the cloud, create those entities that you want to integrate with and use them across the board. So again, that reusability, using that information in our reports, tying together with our business and our workflow information, in our forms, so we can surface information to our users inside of a form, bringing in and being that bridge between those systems. And then, of course, reporting. Being able to provide visibility out of the box reports with K2 into your workflow, into the performance of your users, audit trails, so you can see who made what decision and when that decision was made. So again, having that full visibility into every step of that process. And again, that's really the 4 pillars of the K2 platform. So let's talk a little bit deeply about what we're going to see today in the demonstration. So we'll talk about term management, so being able to manage terms that go into a contract, whether those terms might be repeatable or new terms based on function. So you can have an administrative access so that you can create new terms, or while you're in the creation of the contract process, you can start selecting which terms you want to use in that contract. So we'll see a little bit of the term management. And again, using the K2 forms, some of the robustability or robustness of those forms inside of that process. The next piece that we're going to focus on is approval routing. So being able to route tasks to different users that need to approve different sets of the process. So for certain types of contracts, you might want to have a heavy focus on financial review, whereas maybe we have a default contract. But being able to have what I call 3 different types of approval routing. Static, so there's always a predefined route. That's probably more of our default contract approval, so we can send tasks to a specified set of users ahead of time. You have a dynamic type of approval routing, so you can set tasks for users more dynamically, so I can create those on the fly, so which users need to be receiving tasks. And then I can create something more of a template based. So I can start with that maybe default routing scenario, so I send it to the 3 users. But as part of my process, I want to go ahead and send it to 2 additional users. So making modifications to your contract routing by starting with a template. So again, the number of scenarios you can use for routing those tasks to different users. Then we talk about reporting and visibility again. So being able to be part of that process and also have visibility for those that are not engaged in the approval process. So being able to search to find contracts, searching through the different contracts, and also have the ability to really just kind of get a list of those reports and tie that together with our business, our line of business information. So I can search maybe our CRM directory and find different customers that we need to look at contracts for. So again, being able to report on that as well. And then, of course, see some nice graphics on that, so I can look at user performance. I can see if there are any trends related to why we're terminating so many contracts, why are we not actually creating them, also by type. So if I have specific types of contracts being created, I can see the trends on that as well. And really the final result is, or the end result is the dynamic creation of that contract with all the approvals that came into place, all the terms and conditions that were set, being able to generate that document and have it ready for execution. So again, that full online collaboration for creating this contract lifecycle. And here's kind of a quick screenshot of the process flow that we'll look through in today's demonstration for that as well. All right, so let's go ahead and jump into our live demonstration of that contract creation process. And I'm going to show you the example, and it's really about showing you what's possible with K2. So this is not a solution that we provide. It's essentially just an example of what you can do or what's possible with K2 when it comes to those 4 pillars, whether it be forms, creating those forms, whether it be administrative functionality, or inline or in-flight creation of tasks and approvals. The forms, the workflow, being able to send tasks to different users to follow that predefined or dynamic path. The data, so being able to integrate with those existing systems, and then finally a reporting. So we're going to see quite a mix of that today in the demonstration. All right, so let me go ahead and just switch over to my environment here. And again, if you have any questions throughout the presentation, please feel free to type those in the Q&A panel. We'll go ahead and answer those. All right, so the first thing I'm going to do is open up my SharePoint portal site. And again, I'm using SharePoint in this sense as my collaboration environment. So this entire demonstration can be run outside of SharePoint for purposes of the demonstration and to make it easy to go between users and different tasks. We're going to stay inside of this environment. So a couple of things as I get started, just to kind of highlight real quickly. We'll talk about the K2 work list where tasks are delivered to different users. Obviously, this is a SharePoint web part, so they can open up their tasks within SharePoint, and those tasks are assigned just to that user. So it's security trimmed, so when this user opens up their portal site, they can see their tasks, whether that be in SharePoint or outside of SharePoint. You can also receive an email, reply to the email for that task, or open up the form relative to that as well. You can see a quick little report that we've created that processes that I have started. So if I want to look at processes and maybe they're in somebody else's hands, typically we get the question of, well, how do I see if I've started a process? Can I see what step it's on, even though it's not routed back to me? I want to see what stage it's in. And then you can also see processes that you have been involved in. So it's not necessarily processes that you started, but you at some point touched that process. So you can see a report on that as well. And again, these are just web parts using some of the out-of-the-box reporting with K2 to put that on my dashboard here. Now, a couple of other things I want to talk about, just quickly touch on, but we're going to go in depth in the demonstration, is the management of terms. So as part of my contract, I'm going to add terms and conditions to my contract. So here I'm showing you the administrative portion of that. So I can actually go in and add new terms, create new terms, etc. Now, the key thing about K2 and reusability is this is a K2 form. It's surfaced inside of SharePoint. It can be used as a standalone application as well, so it doesn't have to be inside of SharePoint. But essentially, you can actually reuse this inside of the contract creation process. So if you're in the middle of creating a contract and you decide, I've got a number of terms, but I need to add another one, you don't have to back all the way out to get to the administrative function or this screen. This screen will actually surface itself inside of that contract creation process. So we'll see the same screen inside of that creation process so that we don't have to back out. And again, we don't have to create a new screen for that or a new form. This form is being reused and surfaced elsewhere. Same for contract routes, so being able to create those 3 different types of approval levels. The static approval levels, I've already got a set of static approvers, my dynamic approvers, and then using a template. So we'll see that as well. And again, this is an administrative type of form, but we'll see this form surface itself inside of our contract process. There's some other things up here we'll go ahead and talk about once we create a contract, finding a contract, and some of the reporting as well. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and create a new contract. Let me get back to my main screen here. And I'm going to open up a window. And in this window, I've got the first step of creating a contract. So here's my first step of I want to create a new contract. Now, again, this form is surfaced inside of SharePoint, but it can be taken out of SharePoint as well. This is what we call our K2 form, our K2 Smart form. And again, everything that you see today that I'm showing you is all built without writing code. So whether it's the form, integration to your existing system, the report, as well as the workflow itself. All right, so let's go ahead and just give us a contract number here. Just go ahead and type in any value. And we'll make it version 2 of this contract, 2.0. We'll give it a title. So the title for this one I think I'm going to do is staff rental policy. Staff service. So as part of this process, I'm going to select here a company. So typically I want to look at my service policies when it relates to staff members. So how are we going to put a contract in place for our staff members when they want to service an item? So we'll call our project staff service. And now we're going to select a company ID. So we can fill it in our company ID, and here's another area where you can integrate with your existing system. So if I select the ellipse button, it's actually going to retrieve information from my CRM environment. So it's currently going into CRM. So this is my K2 form search capability going into CRM so that I can find the appropriate customer that I'm trying to create the contract against. We also have the ability to go ahead and search for a specific customer. In this case, I want to look at bike experts. So I'm going to go ahead and just double-click bike experts here. Comfort information, so I don't have to retype anything. And again, being able to query my existing system and retrieve some of that data back into my form. I don't have to go swivel chair, find the person, go into my emails. I have everything right here in one place, having that integrated. And again, you can integrate it with CRM, you can integrate it with your existing system, whatever that might be. It's just a matter of what you tie that ellipse button to as well. And again, all that is done without writing any code. All right, so I've got my company information, I've got my company ID filled out. Let's go ahead and fill out some of the key elements of our contract creation process. One of those might be the effective start date. So as you'll notice, when I select my date, so I'm going to go ahead and just grab a date for the start here, and we'll just do April 1st. You can see that other dates properly filled out for me. So again, interaction with my form, filling out a date based on different business policies. I've automatically set the expiration alert date, which will then kick off a process when that date comes to life. Termination notices, renewal dates. So again, having the ability to manage the life cycle. It's not just about the creation, it's about the maintenance or expiration or renewals for this contract, and having those dates automatically set for you based on business policy manually, and change those dates as well. The classification for this, we'll go ahead and select some subcategories. So we'll say it's a software-related contract here. And again, as I'm selecting the drop-down list, the other drop-down lists now cascade. So I selected software, and now I get the option to choose infrastructure application, and then a contract type based on that. So you can see the form is interacting with my user. Whatever the user is selecting, the form is responding to and creating and retrieving the information. Now this information is actually coming from my SQL database, so I can retrieve my information into my drop-down list from my forms as well. And then we have our terms, so we're not going to set any terms at the moment. We'll go ahead and use that through the rest of the creation process. And then we'll go ahead and set this as a unit type of process. All right, so we've got most of our contract creation, or at least the starting point of our contract set to start. Let's go ahead and save new. And again, of course, we have some validation in place, so we want to make sure that the description is properly filled out. We'll go ahead and put a comment for our description of this contract. We'll just put a service policy for our staff. We'll go ahead and create, save new. Now what's happening behind the scenes is that K2 platform is now taking in effect. So we've got the K2 form now triggering a process that's going to begin the area where we can go in and fill out the rest of the information for our contract. So it's rerouting us to another page that allows us to continue to fill in the rest of the pieces, whether it means contract contacts, terms, attachments, and then of course being able to start that workflow. So you can see I don't have to go route off into another system to begin starting that workflow process. I don't have to step away from this contract creation process. I can update any information that I see. So again, we've got the information we've already filled out. If I want to apply or set some contacts for this, so there might be times where there's already a contact set up. So in my case, I selected a contact or a customer from my CRM database. So I might want to retrieve the contact relative to that. So what we're doing now is we're retrieving the contact that might already be assigned to that customer. So we'll go ahead and double-click Monica. So she's already assigned. I can add new contacts as well. If I have any internal contacts I want to add, I can add those as well into this contract. Contract terms. So now this is where we start getting the real dynamic excitement about creating contracts and that life cycle. And again, this is the same screen we saw earlier, that administrative screen. Now we can see it inside of the actual contract creation process. So I don't have to back out and go make my change. I can come right in and add my terms directly. So I can add terms from scratch. I can start adding those in. Or I can search some templates that I've got in place and start modifying the templates. So here I've got a pop-up screen that shows me I can look for a specific type of contract. So I can add contracts, create new ones, etc. In my case, I want to start with our top level. I'm going to drill down into that top level. And as I drill down, you'll notice that I see the appropriate definitions and terms libraries related to that top level of my contract or my contract terms. In this case, I'm going to grab my sample terms library, and I want to see what those look like, so I'll drill down into that. So I can see that these probably look good for my purposes today, so I'm going to go ahead and create that. You can also see that I can add new ones. So again, remember, you have the ability to use that static or template style, or you can start with a template and add new contract terms as well. If I don't like any of those, I can go back to my parent. But for my case, I like the way those look, so I'm not only going to add the sample term library, I want to add all the term and its children to my contract. So again, those contract terms are created. I want to go ahead and add all of them. So I'll just go ahead and select add term and all children. And what's going to happen is we're going to start seeing this populate. So I'm going to refresh my screen here, and I can see those terms starting to get added to my contract. So not only are they getting added in a online version, so we're seeing it online, but behind the scenes, what's happening as well as we go through the approval processes specifically, that actual document is getting created where all these contract terms are getting added to it. So right now, I'm just really in the maintenance mode or creation mode of selecting the terms I want to add. But again, remember, the end result is we're going to retrieve all this information and throw it into that document, the real executable contract. So our terms are created, so we look good with that. Let's go ahead and add an attachment to this. So there's maybe some documentation related to this contract that we want to create. So I'm going to go ahead and attach that file. And again, really what I'm showing you is the ability to, and what's possible with K2, whether it's adding documents to an existing contract, whether it's searching for existing terms that might exist in your existing system. It's really about what's possible. So this example may or may not relate to what you do in your organization, but again, it shows you some of what's possible with some of the platform pillars that K2 provides. So we've got our contract in place. We can look at that contract. And then we've got now our workflow. So we're ready to start delegating tasks to different users and get the approvals in place for this specific contract. And again, here's another area where we can see the dynamic creation of assignment of users. So I can add specific users. So I can dynamically set who the approvers are. And in most cases, you want to start with a template, or you typically have a template, because most contracts usually start with a certain set of people, and then those change depending on the type of contract it might be. And you can interrogate that automatically, or you can do it manually here, which is what I'm going to show you. So the first thing I want to do is go ahead and select a template. And this pulls back the number of templates I already have in place. And now as I select one of those templates, so I'll select my default contract, you can see my approvers. And I can go into each one of those approvers by selecting them and changing who that needs to be. So it doesn't necessarily change the template itself, but it only changes it for this specific contract that we're creating. If you wanted to change it at the template level, again, you would go into the admin screens to do that. So our financial risk, so I want to send tasks to different users, and again, I want users to receive those at the same time. So we have group level of approvers, and then obviously the ability to add new ones as well. So if I wanted to add a new a task or a new level here for another user, I can select a different drop down here. Maybe I want to do a group approval, and it's going to go ahead and set to Bob as well. And we'll make this level 3. And you can see I now have a new user to add in as well. For our case, we're just going to go ahead and use our default because we want everything to get sent to Bob so we don't have to jump around to different users. I'm going to select Bob there, and I'm going to go ahead and add that to our approvers. So I'm going to go ahead and select him here. Edit. I'm going to add my routes. And again, same concept. Those now start getting added to my process. We'll see those show up. And then we've got one more approver. There we go. And at this point, I can go ahead and edit from this spot and start adding new users or approvers or removing approvers as well. So if I didn't want to have this fourth approver, I can go ahead and delete. So now I only have 3. So again, it's a matter of what you want to do for your task, but K2 is allowing you, it's not limiting you, but allowing you to make it based on your strategic policy for building contracts. So now that we have all our users in place, let's go ahead and start the approval workflow. So again, as you can imagine, K2 behind the scenes is taking everything that was created as part of this input scenario and retrieving that and kicking off that K2 process. So I'm going to go back into my main home site here. And what we should see shortly is the ability to create the contracts or to start managing or responding to those contracts. So you can see I've got in my K2 work list a new task assigned to me. I can also check my email and see that task that has been assigned to me. And remember, these tasks were driven and assigned based on what I selected as part of my creation process. So I assigned everything to Bob, and I used the template, but I could have automatically or manually created a different user as well. Let's take a look at our processes that we started. You can see we have our contract approval for our staff service policies. I'm going to look at one of the out-of-the-box reports that shows an end user what this process looks like. So we can see what steps are being created, what task it's sitting on, and also a nice feature with K2 is because we have this ability to do it dynamically or send tasks dynamically, we want to be able to drill in. So this is the power of K2 and allowing you to do things in that dynamic fashion. I can click on this because this step is actually routing tasks to those different users dynamically. What's really nice is I have the ability to drill into a sub-process. So you can call a main process or a parent process, and you can call a sub-process. Sometimes this is useful in onboarding scenarios, employee onboarding, customer onboarding, where those might actually spawn off sub-processes so that other departments can do whatever is necessary. In this case, we're spawning off a process that will route the task dynamically to those users. So I can drill into that secondary process, look at that report here, and I can see it's assigned to Bob. But you also see I've got different metadata or data being tracked as well. So again, you have that compliance, you have that auditability. I know what task was assigned to this user, I know what approval he's making, I know how long it's been open. So at the moment he opens up that task, K2 is marking that as it's now open, and we can see how long it's going to take him to respond to that task. So I'm going to leave this window open for a moment, and we'll actually watch this walkthrough. I'm going to actually open up the secondary steps. We can see Bob modify that task. So again, I'm going to leave that window up so we can see that task move through. I'm going to open up my task on my K2 work list. Now this shows us the task itself. So here I can go in and approve the task. I can take a look at the terms, make any changes to those terms. And again, this is where we can do that and actually see the process flow. We can see our workflow actions, which are automatically created for us. And of course, I have the ability to look at all the information relative to the creation of that contract. See the contacts, the terms. I can go in and modify terms. So if I want to modify the payment section, I can modify that, save that as well. I can add new terms. So as part of this process, maybe I need to add a new term because it's related to employee information. The nice thing also is you can see which tasks. So again, these users are involved in the approval process. I can also see who the tasks are getting sent to. And you can see it's in progress, and the other two are not started yet because we have not completed the step. So we can go ahead and make a comment for this. So everybody who touches the task can add comments as well. So we'll just do a quick add comment. Made a change. So we made a change to that, and we'll see those comments also surface up as we go through. And of course, the activity log. What is K2 doing behind the scenes? So again, have that full auditability. So the contract was created, removed it to the next routing scenario. So you have full visibility into every step of that process. So let's go ahead and submit the approval. And again, we can approve or decline that task. let's go ahead and submit this. Now, as we submit that step, what we can see in our approval process or our workflow is that task being routed. So we see that Bob completed that first step, but let's go back into our main process, or our parent process, because now it's actually sitting and waiting for the next user, which happens to be Bob in this case. But again, that is just kind of going through a loop until all tasks have been routed to and completed. So if we open up our main site again, and I'm just going to refresh my work list. So now we're sitting on legal review. So again, I can open up legal review. And again, if I open up the route again, we saw this previously. The subtask, it's now sitting again. So again, you can see the dynamic nature of this process, this contract management process, and what K2 as a platform is doing, routing those tasks dynamically to the different users and showing that visibility throughout that process. So I'm going to go ahead and just quickly finish up the routing of these next two tasks. Again, we can see the contracts and the activity logs that came through. So everything is being captured. I'll look at my comments for this. You can see the made change, our contract routes. We can now see the next one is in progress. So the last one we'll do is that group approval. So let's go ahead and submit our approval for this. I didn't make any comments in this case. And then just as quickly as I submit it, K2 routes it, finds the next user that we need to route it to, and then gives us the next task, which is the task group policy. So real quickly, I'm just going to action that task. And again, obviously the same information, unless we make changes to it, will be in place. Let me just scroll down and look at our routing, our task routing. And again, obviously I'm logged in as the same user, which is probably not typically the case. You're probably going to route these to different users. It's probably going to take more than just the 5 or 10 minutes that I'm doing to do this approval process. But again, it's really about showing you what's possible with K2 and not a real live example of contract policy. So we see we're sitting on that group approval, which is what we expect. Let's go ahead and submit that and get through that process. Submit our task here. And let's walk through our next step here. So all our approval routing have been set, so we should expect this to now change route. So no more tasks to route to. And of course, we now completed our process. So we'll send a notification that we've got approval. So again, K2 is dynamically routing the tasks in a loop type of fashion and then routed accordingly. So we can see some different charting as well. So we can see which tasks created or took the longest, and obviously the routing, because each user had to go route or receive those tasks and complete those tasks. And again, if we wanted to get more specific into each one of those users, we can drill into those child processes, if you will, to see which users are actually routing those tasks. So again, nice visibility from a user experience to be able to see what's going on in the process. Now let's take a step back from that, a little higher level, and look at some of the reporting and being able to find those contracts. So if I'm a user that's not engaged in the approval process, I want to be able to find those contracts. So again, using one of K2's forms to be able to create a search capability. So here's a form showing me all contracts that have been created, but I'm looking specifically for those service-related ones. So I'm going to do a search so I can find my contracts. Looks like I've got 2 of them. One is pending and one is active. This is the one we just completed, which was the effective date of 4/1. The nice thing about it too is I can double-click into that and now drill into that contract directly and see everything that happened as part of that process. So not only can I see it as I'm going through the process, but somebody that's not engaged in the process, given the appropriate rights, of course, can now visualize and have access to that process and take a look at that contract. Another thing we can look at is some of the reporting features. So if I want to look at some of my reports, I can now start grabbing reports, retrieving some of that information that we used in the contract creation process and the maintenance of that. So how many contracts were created, and we can see a nice trend here. And again, you can use different types of reports for that, tying together our line of business information, line of business meaning what type of contract, so corporate contracts, employee purchases, with the workflow, so what number of them. I can tie those all together as well. And then of course, if you want to just see a detailed report of that, I can get a list of all contracts created and then do a search for service contracts as well. Just another level or type of capability to search for contracts. Again, being able to use all the information given to you for this particular process. All right, so I'm going to jump back into my slide deck real quickly and just kind of see a summary of what we saw today. And it's really about those 4 pillars of managing that life cycle. But if we look even deeper, it's really about that business application. It's only as good as the results it delivers. You want to be able to improve your business, drive down costs, improve efficiency, control that risk, compliance, customer service. We can go on and on and on. But again, today I hope you see what is possible with K2 and specifically around that contract management process.